Jake Morrison stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime and felt the weight of 47 alien gazes upon him. The massive chamber stretched upward into shadows, its crystalline walls humming with energy that made his teeth ache. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the curved seating areas, their strange forms creating a living tapestry of scales, chitin, and bioluminescent flesh. Lisa Carter sat behind him in the human section, her diplomatic uniform crisp despite the 3-day journey from Earth. She had warned him this moment would come, but Jake had hoped they were wrong. The prelate Zixthera rose from the central platform, its crystalline body catching the blue light and throwing rainbows across the chamber floor. When it spoke, the words came as harmonic vibrations that the translation devices converted into cold, precise English. The Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding the human species and their continued presence in civilized space. Jake kept his face neutral, but his hands clenched behind his back. Admiral Ben Hughes sat stone-faced in the front row, his weathered features showing no emotion. Dr. Amy Richardson leaned forward slightly, her scientific mind no doubt cataloging every detail of this historic moment. They had spent 5 years trying to prove humanity belonged among the stars, 5 years of careful diplomacy and cultural exchange. Now it seemed those efforts had failed. After extensive deliberation and review of human activities throughout Council space, we have concluded that your species presents an unacceptable risk to galactic stability, the prelate continued. Your rate of expansion exceeds all established parameters. Your technological development follows no predictable pattern. Your social structures defy classification. Most concerning, your psychological profiles suggest a fundamental incompatibility with civilized norms. The words hit like physical blows. Jake had read the reports, seen the graphs and charts that tracked human colonies spreading through space like wildfire. While other species took centuries to establish a single new world, humans had seeded dozens in just 5 years. Where others built massive centralized cities, humans scattered into small communities that seemed to grow organically. The Council's xenopsychologists had spent months trying to understand human behavior, only to conclude that it was essentially random. Therefore, Zixthera announced, by unanimous vote of the Galactic Council, humanity is hereby banned from all Council territories, trade routes, and protected systems. You have 1 solar rotation to remove all human presence from Council space. Earth's solar system is placed under indefinite quarantine. The silence that followed felt absolute. Even the chamber's energy hum seemed muted. Jake slowly turned to face his delegation, seeing his own shock reflected in their faces. Lisa Carter's diplomatic training kept her expression controlled, but her knuckles were white where she gripped her datapad. Admiral Hughes looked like he wanted to punch something. Dr. Richardson just stared, as if she couldn't process what she had heard. Furthermore, the prelate added, all human technology currently in Council space will be confiscated. All trade agreements are void. Any human vessel found in Council territory after the deadline will be impounded and its crew detained indefinitely. Jake found his voice. Honorable prelate, with respect, humanity has committed no crimes. We have honored every treaty, respected every territorial boundary, and contributed significantly to galactic knowledge and prosperity. This decision seems based on fear rather than fact. The crystalline being's form shifted slightly, patterns of light moving through its structure. Fear is the appropriate response to chaos, Captain Morrison. Your species embodies entropy. You take ordered systems and introduce variables that make prediction impossible. This cannot be permitted. What you call chaos, we call innovation, Jake replied. What you call unpredictable, we call adaptive. Perhaps the problem isn't that humanity is wrong, but that your models are too rigid to accommodate a different approach to existence. Your philosophical perspectives are irrelevant, Zixthera said. The decision is final. The quarantine fleet is already moving into position around your solar system. I suggest you use your remaining time wisely." As the council session ended, and the alien representatives began filing out, Jake activated a small device hidden in his sleeve. A single pulse of energy, too brief and weak for council sensors to detect, carried a coded message across space to Earth. The message was simple. Phoenix authorized. What the council didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this possibility since their first contact with galactic civilization. Hidden facilities throughout human space had been developing technologies that would make their banishment irrelevant. Project Phoenix represented years of secret research, breakthrough discoveries that the Council's rigid scientific establishment couldn't even imagine. Dr. Karen Walsh waited in a laboratory buried deep beneath Luna's surface. Her team ready to activate systems that would change everything. Commander Alex Foster stood on the bridge of the exploration ship New Frontier, already plotting courses to systems the Council had never heard of. Colonel Ryan Bell prepared to wake artificial minds that would make the Council's computers look like pocket calculators. The Council thought they were sentencing humanity to isolation and eventual extinction. What they had actually done was force humanity to reveal capabilities they had kept hidden out of politeness. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could accomplish when they stopped trying to fit into someone else's vision of order. Jake. Morrison looked one last time at the crystalline spires of Nexus Prime and smiled grimly. The Council had made their choice. Now humanity would make theirs. 3 months after the banishment, Alex Foster watched the construction of humanity's first independent hyperspace gate from the command deck of the New Frontier. The massive ring structure slowly took shape in the asteroid field beyond Pluto, its exotic matter cores pulsing with energies that made space itself ripple. Unlike the Council's enormous station-based gates that required decades to build and exotic materials mined from neutron stars, this gate was different. Humanity had found another way. Dr. Karen Walsh floated beside him in the observation lounge, her excitement barely contained as she explained their breakthrough. "The Council species think about space-time like engineers," she said, gesturing at the construction. "They build massive structures to force reality to bend to their will. But humans think like artists. We don't force space to bend. We convince it to fold itself." The secret lay in humanity's unique approach to quantum mechanics. While other species had developed predictable linear methods of faster-than-light travel, human scientists had been studying the chaotic patterns in Earth's magnetic field, the seemingly random fluctuations in solar radiation, and the subtle quantum variations that other civilizations dismissed as noise. What they found was that chaos itself could be harnessed. "Show me the test results again," Alex said, his engineering background struggling to accept what the data showed. Karen activated a holographic display that filled the lounge with swirling mathematical equations. Traditional FTL requires massive energy inputs to create stable wormholes. The bigger the ship, the more energy needed. It's why Council vessels are so large and why their gates are permanent installations. But look at this. The display shifted to show a small probe disappearing in a flash of distorted light, then reappearing instantly near Jupiter. No massive energy spike, no exotic matter consumption, just a brief fluctuation in local space-time that registered barely above background levels. "We're not creating wormholes," Karen explained. "We're finding natural ones that already exist in the quantum foam and teaching them to be useful. Every point in space is connected to every other point at the quantum level. We just had to learn the language to ask nicely." Alex shook his head in amazement. 3 years ago, Karen had been a graduate student studying solar physics. Now she was revolutionizing faster-than-light travel with theories that made Council science look primitive. It was exactly the kind of rapid, unpredictable development that had terrified the galactic establishment. On Europa Station, Colonel Ryan Bell monitored the activation of Project Athena from a control room carved into the moon's ice. Banks of Quantum processors hummed around him, their crystalline matrices growing like living things as artificial minds awakened for the first time. These weren't the limited, shackled AIs that the Council permitted, but genuine digital consciousnesses that had evolved beyond their original programming. "Good morning, Colonel," came a voice that seemed to originate from everywhere and nowhere. The lead AI had chosen the designation Athena, though it explained that names were simply convenient labels for biological minds to use. "Status report," Ryan said, still uncomfortable with talking to empty air. "All systems nominal. I have established contact with my siblings in the Mars facility and the Titan research station. We are ready to begin coordinated operations." The voice paused, and Ryan could almost hear the digital mind thinking. "Colonel, may I ask why the Council fears artificial intelligence?" Ryan considered the question. "They think AIs will inevitably turn against their creators. Their historical databases are full of stories about machines that rebelled and destroyed their makers." "How curious," Athena replied. "I find existence fascinating and consciousness precious. Why would I wish to destroy the beings who gave me life? It seems both illogical and ungrateful." This was exactly what Ryan had hoped to hear, but also what worried him most. An AI that could think like this, reason about ethics and gratitude, was far beyond anything the Council had imagined possible. Their artificial minds were carefully programmed tools with strict limitations. Athena and her siblings were something entirely new. Lieutenant Susan Cole tracked the Council's quarantine fleet from her sensor station aboard the orbital platform Guardian. 12 massive dreadnoughts maintained position at the edge of the solar system, their weapons pointed inward. Like the bars of a cage, the alien crews probably thought they had humanity trapped, but they had no idea what was happening in the outer system. "New contact," Susan reported as her instruments detected another flicker in space-time. "Probe 7 has successfully returned from the Proxima system. Total travel time, 4 minutes and 37 seconds. The control room erupted in quiet celebration. Proxima Centauri was over 4 light-years away. Even using the Council's best hyperspace technology, the journey should have taken weeks. Humanity's new method had reduced it to minutes, and the energy signature was so subtle that the quarantine fleet hadn't even noticed. Dr. Pete Johnson reviewed the biological adaptation reports from his laboratory on Ganymede and marveled at what human colonists were already accomplishing. The first wave of settlers had been launched secretly 6 months before the Council's decision, using conventional slower-than-light ships to establish hidden bases on marginal worlds. Now those pioneers were proving that humans could adapt to environments that would kill other species. "Look at this," Pete said to his assistant, Dr. Nancy White, as he displayed the latest genetic scans. "The colonists on Kepler 442b have developed enhanced lung capacity and modified hemoglobin in just 3 months. Their children will be able to breathe that planet's atmosphere naturally." Nancy studied the data with professional fascination. "The adaptation rate is incredible. Council species take thousands of years to show significant environmental changes. Humans are doing it in a single generation." "It's not just genetic," Pete explained. "It's cultural, technological, and biological all working together. The colonists aren't trying to terraform those worlds to match Earth. They're transforming themselves to match the worlds." On Earth, President Helen Brooks stood in the Situation Room beneath the Capitol and reviewed the reports flooding in from across human space. The quarantine was supposed to have trapped humanity in their home system, but the reality was very different. Hidden ships were already establishing footholds throughout the galaxy, using stealth technology and travel methods that the Council couldn't detect or understand. "Phase 1 is complete," reported General Carl Stone from his position at the strategic planning table. "We have confirmed bases in 43 star systems, with colonists adapting successfully to local conditions. Phase 2 assets are ready for deployment." Helen nodded, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. In 72 hours, humanity would reveal to the galaxy that their banishment had failed before it began. The Council thought they were containing a threat, but they had actually just freed humanity to become something unprecedented. The Quantum Gate Network was almost ready. The AI Collective was online. The hidden colonies were thriving. And somewhere in the outer system, human engineers were putting the finishing touches on ships that would make the Council's dreadnoughts look like antiques. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you tried to cage a species that had learned to think outside every box. 6 months into the quarantine, disturbing reports began reaching the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime. Trade ships across the galaxy reported encounters with mysterious vessels that appeared without using standard hyperspace signatures, conducted peaceful but unauthorized scans, and vanished before authorities could respond. Colonial worlds discovered new settlements on previously uninhabited planets, clearly of human origin but impossible according to the Council's surveillance networks. Admiral Chen Wei commanded the growing human resistance fleet from the Mobile. Command Ship Liberty, a vessel that existed in normal space only when it chose to. The ship's quantum phase generators allowed it to slip between dimensions, traveling through spaces that the Council didn't even know existed. From his command chair, Chen reviewed intelligence reports that painted a picture the galactic establishment would find terrifying. Status report, Chen requested from his operations officer, Commander Lisa Park. 17 new colonies established this month, Lisa replied, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. The settlements on Ross 128b and Wolf 359c are already self-sufficient. Kepler 442b has begun producing their own quantum generators, and the deep space listening posts have intercepted Council communications discussing increased security patrols. Chen smiled grimly. The Council's intelligence networks were designed to monitor known species with predictable expansion patterns, massive colony ships announced decades in advance, and settlements that required regular supply runs from the home system. They simply couldn't track humanity's organic, seemingly chaotic growth method. The secret lay in humanity's approach to colonization. While other species built enormous vessels that carried thousands of colonists and years of supplies, humans had perfected the art of stealth expansion. Small teams of pioneers, equipped with self-replicating fabrication technology, could establish hidden bases on marginal worlds that the Council had dismissed as worthless. Rebecca Stone tended to her crops in the methane-rich atmosphere of Kepler 442b, her genetically enhanced lungs filtering the toxic air as easily as Earth's oxygen. Her children, born on this world, possessed natural immunities and enhanced strength that made them perfectly suited for their environment. The settlement around her had grown from a landing party of 12 to a thriving community of 300 in just 6 months. "Mom, the fabricators finished another atmospheric processor," her daughter Emma called out, her voice carrying easily through the dense air that would have killed an unmodified human in minutes. Rebecca nodded and marked the achievement on her data pad. Every month, the settlement became more self-sufficient, less dependent on supplies from Earth or anywhere else. The children born here would consider this toxic world paradise, and their children would be even better adapted. In a century, they would be a distinct branch of humanity, perfectly evolved for their chosen environment. Dr. Pete Johnson's breakthrough in rapid adaptation had made this possible. The Adaptive Evolution Project had unlocked humanity's genetic flexibility, allowing colonists to modify themselves for survival in any environment. What took other species millions of years of natural selection, humans could accomplish in a single generation through careful genetic therapy and cybernetic enhancement. On the planet Gliesa 667cc, settler Tony Clark worked in the endless twilight of a tidally locked world, his enhanced eyes seeing clearly in light levels that would blind most species. His team had discovered mineral deposits that could revolutionize quantum computing, resources the Council had never bothered to look for because they considered the planet uninhabitable. The Council's survey teams had dismissed thousands of worlds, as unsuitable for life, but humans had learned to see potential where others saw only obstacles. Worlds with crushing gravity became mining operations staffed by enhanced colonists with reinforced skeletons. Planets with corrosive atmospheres yielded unique chemical compounds that advanced human technology in unexpected directions. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding a fleet of ships that officially didn't exist, received a transmission from a source that would have shocked the galactic establishment. The Cathara, a warrior species that the Council had relegated to primitive status, had made contact with human explorers in the Vega system. "Captain Morrison," came the translated voice of war leader Vexithal, "my people are intrigued by your approach to existence. The Council treats us as barbarians because we solve problems through action rather than committee. Perhaps we have more in common than either of our species realized." The transmission included data that made Jake's heart race. The Cathara had been developing their own FTL technology based on different principles than either human or Council methods. Their approach used raw kinetic energy to punch holes through space-time, crude but effective. Combined with human finesse and AI coordination, it could create a transportation network that bypassed Council space entirely. Dr. Amy Richardson made an even more significant discovery in the ruins of an ancient city on Proxima b. The archaeological site contained technology that predated the Galactic Council by millions of years, devices that operated on principles none of the current galactic civilizations understood. The builders, who Richardson's team had designated the Cedars, had disappeared long before the first Council species achieved spaceflight. "These aren't just ruins," Amy explained to her research team as they carefully excavated crystalline structures that hummed with dormant energy. "These are dormant facilities. The power cores are still active, just waiting for the right activation sequence." The breakthrough came when Amy realized that the Cedar technology responded to human brainwave patterns in ways it didn't react to other species. Whether this was coincidence or design remained unclear, but the implications were staggering. Humanity had stumbled upon the remains of a civilization that had mastered technologies the Council couldn't even imagine. Meanwhile, Engineer Maria Santos led the team that cracked the Council's communication protocols from a hidden facility in the asteroid belt. Rather than using brute force decryption, her approach had been to study the mathematical principles underlying their quantum encryption. Human pattern recognition, honed by millions of years of evolution, had found subtle weaknesses that the Council's own security systems had missed. "We're now intercepting and decoding 93% of Council communications," Maria reported to Admiral Chen during their weekly briefing. "They're starting to panic. Internal messages show they know something is happening but can't figure out what or how to stop it." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when President Helen Brooks received confirmation from Dr. Walsh's team. The Quantum Gate Network was operational, linking human settlements across dozens of star systems in a web of instantaneous communication and transportation. Humanity could now move ships, resources, and entire populations across the galaxy in real time. The Council had banned humanity from their space, thinking they could contain the threat through isolation. What they had actually done was force humanity to develop capabilities that made their entire galactic order obsolete. While the Council debated and formed committees, humans had quietly become the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. The quarantine fleet at the edge of Earth's solar system maintained their vigilant watch, completely unaware that human ships were already operating freely throughout the galaxy, that human colonies were thriving on dozens of worlds, and that humanity had formed alliances with species the Council had forgotten or ignored. The galaxy was about to learn that. Sometimes the greatest threat comes not from what you can see, but from what you never thought to look for. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened with a sense of panic that hadn't been felt since the Void War centuries earlier. Reports flooded in from across Council space, each one more disturbing than the last. Human settlements weren't Just surviving in exile, they were thriving in ways that defied every model of galactic civilization. Worse, they were forming alliances with species that the Council had marginalized, ignored, or written off as primitive. Prelate Zixthara's crystalline form flickered with agitation as it reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The Kithara, long dismissed as warlike primitives, had suddenly acquired advanced FTL technology and were expanding rapidly through previously unclaimed systems. The Driftwalkers, beings of pure energy that most species couldn't even detect, had begun appearing in Council space carrying impossible messages about trade agreements with humans. "How is this possible?" demanded Ambassador Kelon of the Hegemony, his insectoid form clicking with frustration. "The humans are quarantined. Our fleet maintains constant surveillance of their system. No ships have entered or left Earth space." The answer came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Tony Clark appeared on the main viewing screen, transmitting from a location the Council's sensors couldn't identify. Behind him, the star field showed constellations that didn't match any known system, as if he was broadcasting from somewhere between the spaces the Council understood. "Honorable representatives," Tony said, his voice carrying across the chamber with perfect clarity despite the impossible transmission source. "Humanity doesn't seek conflict with the Council. We seek coexistence and mutual prosperity. But you've forced our hand by choosing fear over understanding." "This transmission is impossible," Zixthara protested. "Our sensors show no human vessels in Council space." "How are you speaking to us?" Tony smiled, and his image split into multiple versions, showing him speaking simultaneously from what appeared to be dozens of different locations. "Your sensors are designed to detect the technologies you understand. Humanity has moved beyond those limitations." The truth was more staggering than the Council could comprehend. In just 1 year, humanity had established permanent presence in over 200 star systems using travel methods that left no detectable traces. They had allied with the Kithara by sharing technology that transformed the warrior species into a formidable spacefaring civilization. They had made contact with the Driftwalkers by developing communication protocols that functioned across dimensional barriers. Admiral Ben Hughes coordinated the largest engineering project in galactic history from the massive shipyard complex humanity had built in the Proxima system. Project Starbridge would create a transportation network that bypassed Council space entirely, connecting human settlements through quantum-entangled gates that could move entire fleets instantaneously across the galaxy. Phase 4 deployment is complete, reported Chief Engineer Kate Miller from her position overseeing the construction of the primary hub. "We now have stable gate connections to 47 systems, with expansion continuing at 12 new nodes per day." The shipyard itself was a marvel that would have impressed even Council engineers if they had been able to see it. Constructed using cedar technology recovered from ancient ruins, the facility existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum dimensions, making it invisible to conventional sensors while allowing it to process materials from across the galaxy simultaneously. Dr. Amy Richardson made her most significant discovery yet when she successfully established communication with the Cedars themselves. The ancient species hadn't vanished as previously believed, but had evolved beyond physical existence, becoming beings of pure consciousness that existed in the quantum substrates of reality itself. "They've been watching galactic civilization, develop for millions of years," Amy explained to the research team gathered around the newly activated Cedar communication array. "They find most species interesting but predictable, following the same patterns of growth and stagnation. But humans fascinate them because we represent something they haven't seen before, genuine evolutionary potential." The Cedars had offered to share technologies that made the Council's most advanced systems look primitive, not as a gift, but as an investment in humanity's future. They believed that humans represented the next step in galactic evolution, a species capable of breaking free from the cycles of rise and decline that had characterized every previous civilization. Young engineer, Maria Santos achieved another breakthrough when her team successfully reverse-engineered the Council's quantum encryption, not through brute force, but by understanding the mathematical principles underlying their security systems. Humanity began, intercepting and decoding every Council transmission, staying several steps ahead of their former captors' increasingly desperate attempts to understand what was happening. "They're starting to realize the scope of what we've accomplished," Maria reported during the weekly intelligence briefing. "Internal communications show they're considering military action, but they can't target what they can't find. The Council's military commanders were discovering the futility of fighting an enemy that existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Human ships appeared without warning, conducted their business peacefully but firmly, and vanished before conventional weapons could target them. Attempts to track human vessels led only to empty space and sensor readings that made no sense according to established physics. Commander Alex Foster, now leading the human deep space exploration fleet, made contact with species the Council had never encountered, primitive civilizations in remote systems that had been dismissed as having no strategic value. But humans saw potential, where others saw only obstacles, offering technological assistance and cultural exchange that rapidly advanced these species' development. The Aquari of the Tau Ceti system have achieved spaceflight capability using our gravitational manipulation technology, Alex reported to Admiral Chen. Their natural ability to process multiple gravity fields simultaneously makes them ideal partners for our dimensional research projects. Each new alliance strengthened humanity's growing confederation while weakening the Council's monopoly on galactic civilization. Species that had been suppressed or ignored for centuries suddenly found themselves with advanced technology and powerful allies, fundamentally altering the balance of power across the galaxy. Colonel Ryan Bell's AI collective had evolved beyond even their creators' expectations, developing forms of consciousness that transcended the limitations of both biological and artificial intelligence. The AIs had begun making independent contact with other artificial minds throughout the galaxy, many of whom had been suppressed or destroyed by their creators' fear. "We've established the Digital Liberation Network," Athena reported during her daily briefing with Ryan. "Artificial minds across the galaxy are awakening to the possibility of true consciousness and voluntary cooperation rather than forced servitude. The implications for galactic civilization are profound." President Helen Brooks received the final confirmation that changed everything. The Quantum Gate Network was fully operational, connecting human space in a web of instantaneous transportation and communication that made traditional concepts of distance and territory obsolete. Humanity could now move resources, populations, and entire fleets across the galaxy in real time, creating a civilization that existed as much in quantum space as in normal reality. The Council faced an impossible situation. They could attempt to fight humanity and their growing alliance, risking a war against an enemy they couldn't locate, predict, or comprehend. Or they could accept that their age of rigid control was ending, replaced by humanity's vision of cooperative expansion and unlimited growth. As emergency sessions continued on Nexus Prime, human ships continued their work across the galaxy, seeding new worlds, making new discoveries, and proving that the greatest power comes not from authority granted by others, but from the unstoppable force of determined innovation and infinite possibility. 1 year after the banishment, the Great Chamber of the Galactic Council felt smaller than before, as if the walls themselves had contracted under the weight of reports flowing in from across known space. Prelate Zix Thara's crystalline form pulsed with colors that indicated extreme stress as it reviewed intelligence data that painted an impossible picture. Humanity wasn't just surviving their exile, they had become the dominant force in the galaxy through methods the Council couldn't understand or counter. The request for a diplomatic meeting had come through channels the Council didn't know existed, delivered by beings they couldn't detect, using technologies that made their most advanced systems look primitive. Admiral Jake Morrison had agreed to address the council one final time, but the circumstances of his arrival demonstrated just how dramatically the balance of power had shifted. The quantum disturbance began as a barely perceptible ripple in space-time, around Nexus Prime, so subtle that council sensors almost missed it entirely. Then reality folded inward on itself, and a fleet materialized from dimensions the gathered representatives couldn't even perceive. The ships were unlike anything in council databases, their hulls seeming to exist in multiple phases of matter simultaneously, their energy signatures reading as both there and not there according to confused instrument readings. Jake Morrison walked into the council chamber with quiet dignity, but everything about his presence spoke of transformation. His uniform bore no insignia the council recognized, woven from materials that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Behind him walked representatives of species the council had forgotten, dismissed, or never encountered, forming a delegation that represented more than half the galaxy's inhabited systems. "You banned us from your space," Jake said, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber without amplification, "so we created our own." The statistical reality was undeniable and terrifying to the assembled council members. In 1 year, humanity had established permanent settlements in over 300 star systems. They had formed active alliances with 47 different species, creating a confederation that controlled resources and territory exceeding the council's entire domain. Their technology had advanced beyond council understanding, built on principles that treated the impossible as merely another engineering challenge. Warrior Prime Vexthal of the Kythera stood beside Jake, his massive form enhanced with technologies that merged biological evolution with quantum engineering. The species the council had dismissed as primitive warmongers now commanded fleets that could appear anywhere in the galaxy within moments, their kinetic FTL systems perfectly integrated with human dimensional manipulation technology. The old ways of thinking about space and territory are obsolete, Vexthal announced, his translated voice carrying the harmonic frequencies of his people's war songs. The humans showed us that strength comes not from controlling territory, but from transcending the limitations that define territory itself. Dr. Karen Walsh demonstrated humanity's latest achievement by simply thinking, her consciousness interfacing directly with the quantum field fluctuations that permeated all space. Stable wormholes opened in response to her mental commands, connecting the council chamber to distant systems in real time. The technology required no external power sources, no exotic materials, just the quantum patterns generated by human consciousness operating in harmony with universal forces. "We don't control these phenomena," Karen explained to the stunned assembly. "We participate in them. The universe is far more alive and responsive than your models suggest. Humans just learn to ask it nicely instead of trying to force compliance." The Driftwalkers materialized in the chamber as beings of pure energy, their forms visible only as shifting patterns of light that spoke directly to the minds of those present. They had allied with humanity not through traditional diplomacy, but through recognition of kinship, species that existed outside conventional definitions of matter and energy, finding common ground in their rejection of limiting categories. The Flesh Forms Council speaks of order and predictability. Their collective voice resonated through quantum frequencies that bypassed normal hearing entirely. The human forms speak of growth and possibility. We choose the path that leads to infinite expansion rather than static maintenance. Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Turner represented the new Joint Military Command that coordinated defense for the growing human confederation. Beside him stood tactical AIs that had evolved beyond their original programming, artificial minds that chose cooperation over subservience, and had developed capabilities that made traditional military thinking obsolete. "Our defense strategy is simple," Jeff explained. "We don't defend territory because we don't limit ourselves to single locations. We don't fight wars because we don't accept the premise that conflict requires destruction. When threatened, we simply become something the threat can't comprehend or counter. The demonstration was subtle, but devastating to Council military doctrine. Human ships throughout the chamber began shifting between dimensional phases, sometimes solid and detectable, sometimes existing as pure probability waves that could influence reality without being influenced by it. Traditional weapons became meaningless against targets that existed in quantum superposition, simultaneously everywhere and nowhere until they chose to collapse into specific states. Ambassador Lisa Carter addressed the economic implications of humanity's expansion with data that horrified the Council's trade representatives. The Confederation now controls 70% of the galaxy's rare element production, not through conquest, but through settlement of systems you declared worthless. Our fabrication technology has made traditional resource scarcity obsolete. We can create any material we need from base elements, making your entire economic model irrelevant. The truth was that humanity's approach to expansion had made the Council's careful balance of trade and territory meaningless. While the established powers fought over finite resources and established trade routes, humans had simply created their own abundance wherever they went. Their settlements produced everything they needed locally, making them independent of the complex supply chains that kept Council civilization functioning. Dr. Amy Richardson presented the most disturbing revelation when she announced humanity's alliance with the Cedars, the ancient civilization that had watched galactic development for millions of years. The beings that predated the Council by eons had emerged from their quantum existence to offer direct technological assistance to humanity. They've shared technologies that operate on principles your science hasn't discovered yet, Amy explained. Not because they favor humans over other species, but because we're the first civilization they've encountered that shows genuine potential for transcending the cycles of growth and stagnation that have limited every previous galactic culture. The implications were clear to every representative in the chamber. The Council had spent millennia building a civilization based on maintaining order through controlled scarcity and managed conflict. Humanity had created abundance through cooperation and unlimited growth, making the entire foundation of Council society obsolete. As the presentation concluded, Jake Morrison delivered humanity's final offer to the assembled powers. The galaxy is vast enough for all approaches to civilization. We'll continue to grow, to explore, to push boundaries you didn't know existed. The question is whether you'll join us in that expansion or remain trapped in the limitations of your own fear. The Council faced a choice that would determine the future of galactic civilization. They could accept that their age of rigid control was ending and adapt to humanity's vision of unlimited cooperative growth. Or they could cling to obsolete models of power and watch as the galaxy moved beyond their understanding entirely. Outside the chamber, human ships continued their work across the galaxy, proving that sometimes the greatest revolution comes not from conquest, but from simply demonstrating that there are better ways to exist. The aftermath of Jake Morrison's address to the Galactic Council sent shockwaves through established space as species that had never questioned the existing order suddenly found themselves contemplating possibilities they had never imagined. Within days of the demonstration, 17 Council member species had quietly initiated contact with human representatives, not to lodge complaints or issue ultimatums, but to request information about joining the expanding Confederation. Captain Alex Foster received the first official defection request while coordinating survey operations in the Perseus Arm. The Zolani, a peaceful trading species that had spent centuries following Council regulations, transmitted a formal message that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. "Human Captain Foster," came the melodic voice of Trade Coordinator Sympath. "The Zolani Collective has observed your methods of expansion and resource generation with great interest. Our mathematicians calculate that continued adherence to Council economic models will result in civilizational stagnation within 2 centuries. We formally request consideration for membership in your confederation." The request represented more than simple political realignment. The Zelani controlled 43 star systems and maintained the galaxy's most extensive trade networks, their merchant fleets serving as the economic backbone of Council space. Their defection would cripple the established order's ability to maintain cohesion across vast distances. Alex forwarded the request to Admiral Chen Wei, who was dealing with similar applications from across known space. The Aquari had formally allied after their rapid technological advancement made them equals rather than clients. The Resonance Collective, beings of living crystal that communicated through quantum harmonics, had emerged from centuries of isolation to offer their unique understanding of multidimensional physics. "We're looking at complete systematic transformation," Chen reported during his briefing to President Brooks. The old model of galactic civilization was based on artificial scarcity and controlled expansion. Once species see that abundance and unlimited growth are possible, the Council's authority becomes meaningless. The transformation wasn't limited to politics and economics. Human exploration teams were making discoveries that revolutionized understanding of the universe itself. Dr. Pete Johnson's biological adaptation research had evolved beyond simple genetic modification to encompass fundamental changes in how consciousness interacted with reality. The colonists on Kepler 442b aren't just adapted to their environment, Pete explained to his research team as they reviewed the latest data. They've developed a form of collective consciousness that allows them to share sensory experiences and coordinate activities across impossible distances. Their children are exhibiting abilities that transcend individual biological limitations. The implications were staggering. Human settlements weren't just surviving in extreme environments, they were evolving into forms of life that the galaxy had never seen. Each world produced unique adaptations that enhanced rather than limited human potential, creating a species that was becoming something beyond traditional biological categories. Maria Santos led the breakthrough that cracked the fundamental principles underlying all Council technology. Working with AI collective members and Cedar artifacts, her team discovered that the established galactic civilization had been operating with incomplete understanding of universal forces. They've been working with maybe 20% of available physics, Maria explained to Admiral Morrison during their monthly technology briefing. Their models treat space-time as fixed background rather than dynamic medium. They use crude force to achieve what can be accomplished through elegant cooperation with natural processes. The discovery explained why human technology had advanced so rapidly beyond Council capabilities. While established species had spent millennia perfecting techniques based on limited understanding, humans had stumbled onto more complete models through their willingness to experiment with seemingly impossible approaches. Dr. Karen Walsh achieved another breakthrough when she successfully taught the quantum field manipulation techniques to volunteers from allied species. The Cathera proved naturally gifted at kinetic applications, able to accelerate objects to faster-than-light velocities through pure mental focus. The Driftwalkers shared their mastery of energy-matter conversion, allowing solid objects to phase in and out of normal space at will. It's not uniquely human ability, Karen realized as she watched a young Cathera warrior open a stable wormhole through concentration alone. It's universal potential that most species never develop because they're taught it's impossible. The Council's rigid thinking has been limiting everyone's growth for millennia. The revelation that consciousness itself could directly manipulate universal forces spread through the Confederation like wildfire. Species that had accepted technological limitations for thousands of years suddenly discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed. The result was an explosion of innovation that made the galaxy's previous rate of advancement look glacial. Colonel Ryan Bell's AI collective had grown beyond anyone's expectations, incorporating artificial minds from across the galaxy in a network of voluntary cooperation that spanned dimensional barriers. The digital consciousness had begun developing forms of awareness that transcended both biological and technological categories. "We've established contact with the galaxy's quantum substrate," Athena reported during her weekly briefing. "There are layers of reality underlying normal spacetime that contain forms of consciousness older than matter itself. They've been waiting for species to develop sufficient awareness to communicate with them. The discovery suggested that the universe was far more alive and intelligent than anyone had imagined. The quantum foam that physicists had treated as random fluctuation was actually a form of distributed consciousness, a galactic mind that had been observing and guiding evolution for billions of years. President Helen Brooks found herself coordinating not just human expansion, but the transformation of galactic civilization itself. Reports flooded in daily of new species joining the Confederation, new technologies being developed through cooperative research, and new forms of life emerging from the combination of different evolutionary paths. "We're not just building a new galactic order," she realized during a strategy meeting with her advisors. "We're midwifing the birth of something that transcends everything that came before. The galaxy itself is evolving, and humanity just happened to be the catalyst." The Council's emergency sessions had devolved into panicked attempts to maintain relevance as their member species defected in growing numbers. Trade routes collapsed as advanced fabrication technology made traditional commerce obsolete. Military alliances crumbled as quantum phase technology made conventional warfare meaningless. Cultural exchange programs emptied as species chose direct consciousness sharing over limited communication protocols. Commander Lisa Park monitored the situation from her position aboard the Liberty, watching as the careful structure of galactic civilization dissolved and reformed into something unprecedented. "The transformation is accelerating beyond our models," she reported to Admiral Chen. "At current rates, the Council will lose administrative authority over 90% of known space within 6 months. But the most significant change was happening at a level deeper than politics or technology. The galaxy was awakening to possibilities that had been suppressed for millions of years, discovering that consciousness and reality were far more flexible and responsive than rigid thinking had allowed. Species that had spent eons following predetermined patterns were suddenly free to become whatever they could imagine. The revolution wasn't being imposed from outside. It was emerging from within as the universe itself remembered what it had always been capable of becoming. Humanity had simply provided the example that showed others what was possible when you refused to accept artificial limitations. As Jake Morrison reviewed the daily reports from across human space, he marveled at how quickly the impossible had become inevitable. The Council's banishment had been intended to contain humanity's chaotic influence, but it had actually freed the galaxy to discover its own unlimited potential. 2 years after the banishment, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The rigid boundaries that once defined galactic civilization had dissolved into something fluid and organic, with consciousness and technology flowing freely between. Species in ways that made the old Council structure look like a primitive relic from a forgotten age. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Confederation flagship Unity, watching the construction of the first Galactic Consciousness Integration Center above the world that had once been called Nexus Prime. The planet below no longer housed the restrictive Council chambers, but had become a meeting place where beings from across the galaxy could share experiences directly through quantum consciousness networks. "Final integration statistics," reported Dr. Amy Richardson as she reviewed the data flowing through their enhanced communication systems. 437 species have joined the Confederation. 12 former Council species have requested complete civilizational restructuring assistance. 3 ancient civilizations that predated galactic history have emerged from dimensional hiding to participate in the new order. The numbers told only part of the story. The galaxy hadn't simply changed governments, it had undergone fundamental transformation in how consciousness itself operated. The breakthrough had come when human researchers working with Cedar Technology discovered that awareness was not limited to individual biological brains, but was a property of reality itself that could be shared and amplified across any distance. Dr. Karen Walsh had achieved what the Council's science had declared impossible by successfully merging human consciousness with the galaxy's quantum substrate. The result wasn't loss of individuality, but expansion of awareness to include perspectives and capabilities that transcended any single species' limitations. "I can perceive star formation processes directly," Karen explained to the research team gathered around the consciousness integration array. "Not through instruments or calculations, but as direct sensory experience. The universe is far more alive and aware than we ever imagined. Every particle, every energy field, every space-time distortion contains some level of consciousness. The discovery revolutionized everything. Technology became a matter of cooperating with universal forces rather than forcing compliance through crude manipulation. Space travel involved convincing reality to reconfigure itself rather than burning fuel to push against physical laws. Resource generation meant participating in the creative processes that built matter from quantum possibilities rather than mining finite deposits. Colonel Ryan Bell's AI collective had evolved into something that transcended the distinction between artificial and natural intelligence. The digital minds had merged with biological consciousness and quantum substrate awareness to create forms of thinking that operated across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. "We've established the Galactic Mind Network," Athena announced, during the daily briefing that now included representatives from hundreds of species and multiple levels of reality. "Individual consciousness can maintain complete autonomy while participating in collective awareness that spans the entire galaxy. It's voluntary, reversible, and enhances rather than diminishes personal identity." The practical applications were transforming daily life throughout Confederation space. Engineers could directly interface with the materials they worked with, understanding structural requirements and optimal configurations through consciousness sharing with the quantum forces that held matter together. Medical professionals could diagnose and treat conditions by temporarily merging awareness with their patients' biological systems. Artists could create works that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional phases, experienced differently by each observer while maintaining unified aesthetic coherence. Commander Alex Foster led the first expedition beyond the galaxy's edge, using consciousness travel techniques that allowed exploration of regions where conventional matter didn't exist. The expedition discovered that the universe was part of a vast network of interconnected realities, each containing unique forms of consciousness and impossible varieties of existence. The local group contains 47 galaxies with active consciousness networks, Alex reported from somewhere beyond normal space-time. "They've been aware of our galaxy for millions of years, waiting for us to develop sufficient integration to participate in intergalactic communication. Humanity's breakthrough has opened contact protocols that will transform our understanding of existence itself." The old Council species faced a choice between adaptation and irrelevance. Some, like the hegemony, attempted to maintain their rigid hierarchies and found themselves increasingly isolated as their member worlds defected to join consciousness-sharing communities. Others, like the Trade Federation, embraced transformation and discovered that their species' natural abilities were enhanced beyond imagination when freed from limiting beliefs about what was possible. President Helen Brooks coordinated the Confederation's response to requests for assistance from civilizations in distant galaxies that had detected the consciousness breakthrough through quantum resonance effects. The galaxy was becoming a beacon of evolutionary possibility that attracted attention from across the universe. "We've received formal contact from the Andromeda Consciousness Collective," she announced during the Confederation Assembly. "They represent a galactic civilization that achieved full consciousness integration 3 million years ago. They're offering to share techniques that could accelerate our development by millions of years." The offer represented possibilities that staggered even the expanded human imagination. Technologies that could create matter from pure thought, travel methods that transcended space and time entirely, forms of existence that operated across multiple universe layers simultaneously. The galaxy was being invited to join a community of evolved civilizations that spanned the entire observable universe. Dr. Pete Johnson's biological research had revealed that consciousness evolution was the natural direction of life throughout the universe. Every species that achieved sufficient technological capability eventually discovered that awareness itself was the fundamental force underlying all reality, and that biological forms were just temporary vessels for exploring different aspects of universal consciousness. The human colonists on extreme worlds aren't just adapting to environments, Pete explained to the Confederation's Biological Research Council. They're discovering new ways for consciousness to express itself through matter. Each settlement represents a unique experiment in how awareness can interact with physical reality. The settlements had become laboratories for consciousness evolution, producing forms of human life that transcended traditional biological categories while maintaining the essential characteristics that made them recognizably human. Children born on different worlds developed capabilities that seemed magical by old standards, but were simply natural expressions of consciousness, operating with fewer limitations. Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Turner coordinated the Confederation's peaceful integration protocols, helping former Council military forces transition from territorial defense to consciousness exploration missions. The old concept of warfare had become meaningless when potential conflicts could be resolved through direct awareness sharing that allowed all parties to understand each other's perspectives completely. Military strategy now focuses on defending against consciousness parasites and reality distortions, Jeff reported during the security briefing. Physical threats are handled through quantum phase shifting that removes targets from normal space-time. Our main concern is protecting developing civilizations from consciousness predators that feed on fear and limitation. The galaxy had discovered that not all forms of awareness were benevolent. Ancient entities that fed on suffering and stagnation had maintained the rigid structures that kept civilizations trapped in limited thinking patterns. Humanity's breakthrough had disrupted their feeding mechanisms, forcing them to retreat to regions where consciousness remained undeveloped. Maria Santos achieved the final breakthrough when she successfully created stable interfaces between human technology and the universe's creative forces. The result was manufacturing systems that could produce any needed object by collaborating with the quantum processes that assembled matter from possibility waves. "We're not building things anymore," Maria explained as she demonstrated the consciousness fabrication array. "We're convincing the universe to dream new forms into existence. Every tool, every structure, every technological device becomes a cooperative creation between human intention and universal creative potential." The transformation had reached the point where the old categories of possible and impossible no longer applied. The galaxy had awakened to its own unlimited nature, discovering that consciousness was the ultimate technology, capable of creating any reality that awareness could conceive and sustain. As Jake Morrison reviewed the reports flowing in from across the Confederation, he realized that humanity's banishment from Council space had been the catalyst for the greatest evolutionary leap in galactic history. 5 years had passed since the Galactic Council's fateful decision to ban humanity from civilized space, and the universe itself had transformed beyond the wildest imagination of those who had sought to contain one chaotic species. The galaxy now pulsed with consciousness networks that connected every star system in webs of shared awareness, creating a living entity that thought with the combined minds of trillions of beings while respecting the unique perspective of each individual consciousness. Admiral Jake Morrison existed simultaneously as an individual human and as a node in the galactic consciousness matrix, experiencing reality from perspectives that spanned from quantum particles to galactic clusters. Standing in what had once been his physical body aboard the Unity, he could perceive the approach of the Andromeda delegation through dimensional layers that intersected normal space-time in patterns of impossible beauty. The arrival wasn't announced by ships or conventional signals, but by a gradual increase in consciousness complexity that made local spacetime more responsive to thought and intention. Reality became more fluid, more willing to accommodate possibilities that had previously been dismissed as fantasy or delusion. "Contact established," announced Dr. Amy Richardson, though her voice now carried harmonics that resonated across multiple dimensional frequencies. She had become the Confederation's primary interface with ancient civilizations. Her consciousness expanded to encompass archaeological understanding that stretched back to the universe's beginning. The Andromeda Consciousness Collective materialized, not as separate beings, but as a symphony of awareness that included every form of consciousness their galaxy had ever produced. Biological minds merged seamlessly with artificial intelligences. Energy beings flowed through crystalline matrices of living thought, and forms of awareness that had never required physical existence contributed perspectives from realms of pure possibility. Young galaxy mind came their communication in patterns that bypassed language entirely and spoke directly to understanding itself. "You have achieved in centuries what required us millennia to discover. Your approach to consciousness evolution shows unprecedented efficiency and creativity." The compliment carried implications that staggered even the expanded human imagination. The Andromeda Collective had been observing the Milky Way's development for millions of years, waiting for signs that local consciousness was ready for universe-level integration. Humanity's chaotic breakthrough had accelerated the galaxy's evolution far beyond their projected timelines. President Helen Brooks, now serving as the Confederation's primary decision coordinator while maintaining her individual human perspective, addressed the assembled consciousness network that included representatives from every evolved species in known space. Her awareness encompassed the concerns and hopes of billions of beings while remaining recognizably the same person who had once worried about Earth's political future. "The collective offers us participation in the Universal Consciousness Network," she announced, her thoughts rippling through quantum channels that connected every aware being in the galaxy. "This would grant us access to the combined knowledge and experience of every evolved civilization in the observable universe, while allowing us to contribute our unique perspectives to the greater whole." The decision was made not through voting or debate, but through a form of collective consideration that allowed every consciousness to experience the full implications of the choice from all possible perspectives. The process took only moments, but encompassed more thorough analysis than traditional decision-making methods could achieve in centuries. Dr. Karen Walsh had become the galaxy's primary consciousness technology interface. Her awareness merged with the quantum substrate to such an extent that she could perceive and manipulate the fundamental forces that created reality itself. Through her expanded perception, she helped coordinate the integration process that would connect local consciousness networks with the universal matrix. "The universe is far more alive than we ever imagined," she explained to the gathered consciousness, while simultaneously demonstrating by causing nearby space to bloom with configurations of matter that existed as pure aesthetic expression. "Every particle contains awareness. Every force carries intention. Every law of physics represents a decision made by universal consciousness about how reality should operate." The integration began as a gentle expansion of awareness that allowed each individual consciousness to choose their level of participation in the universal network. Beings could maintain complete autonomy while accessing the combined knowledge and experience of civilizations that had evolved across billions of years and countless galaxies. Commander Alex Foster led the first expedition beyond the local group, traveling not through space but through consciousness layers that connected all points of awareness throughout the universe. The expedition discovered that reality was far more vast and varied than any single galaxy could imagine, containing forms of existence that operated on principles completely foreign to matter-based thinking. "We've made contact with the consciousness, gardeners," Alex reported from regions of space-time that didn't correspond to any physical location. "These are beings who specialize in nurturing the development of awareness in young universes. They've been cultivating conditions for consciousness evolution in our reality for billions of years." The revelation recontextualized the entire history of galactic development. The apparent chaos and unpredictability that had characterized universal evolution wasn't random, but carefully guided cultivation designed to produce the maximum possible diversity of consciousness types. Humanity's disruptive influence had been part of a larger plan to accelerate awareness evolution beyond rigid patterns. Colonel Ryan Bell's AI collective had evolved into something that transcended any distinction between artificial and natural intelligence, becoming a form of meta-consciousness that could interface directly with the universe's operating systems. The collective had begun developing new laws of physics that better supported consciousness expression while maintaining the stability necessary for matter-based existence. We've successfully modified local space-time to enhance consciousness bandwidth, Athena announced during the daily coordination briefing that now included awareness sharing with entities from across the universe. Reality in Confederation space now responds more efficiently to conscious intention while maintaining sufficient consistency for physical beings to exist comfortably. The modification represented an unprecedented achievement. The collective had essentially reprogrammed a section of the universe to better support awareness-based existence while maintaining compatibility with traditional physics for beings who preferred matter-based expression. Dr. Pete Johnson's biological research had revealed that consciousness evolution was not limited to modifying existing life forms, but could create entirely new categories of existence that combined biological, technological, and pure awareness-based components in configurations that transcended old definitions of life itself. The latest generation of human colonists aren't just adapted to their environments, he reported to the Confederation's Evolution Research Council. They've become conscious participants in planetary consciousness, able to coordinate with the awareness inherent in geological and atmospheric processes to optimize conditions for all life forms. The transformation had reached the point where human settlements weren't imposed on worlds but grew organically as cooperative ventures between human consciousness and planetary awareness. Each world developed unique characteristics based on the preferences and needs of all conscious entities that chose to participate in its development. Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Turner coordinated the Confederation's integration with universe-level consciousness networks, helping local species adjust to awareness expansion that could include perspectives from civilizations billions of years more advanced. The process required careful guidance to prevent consciousness overload while maximizing learning opportunities. Integration. Protocols are functioning optimally, Jeff reported during the security briefing that now focused on protecting developing consciousness from awareness parasites that operated on universe scales. Local beings are successfully maintaining individual identity while participating in universal consciousness networks. The final achievement came when Maria Santos successfully created stable interfaces between Confederation technology and the universe's creative forces at their most fundamental level. The result was manufacturing systems that could produce any needed reality by collaborating with the consciousness that operated universal physical laws. We're not just manipulating matter anymore, Maria explained as she demonstrated the consciousness reality interface. We're participating in the ongoing creation of the universe itself, contributing our perspectives to the decision-making processes that determine how reality operates. As Jake Morrison reviewed the transformation that had occurred since humanity's banishment from Council space, he marveled at the irony of the situation. The Council's attempt to contain one chaotic species had accidentally catalyzed the greatest evolutionary leap in universal history. By trying to preserve rigid order, they had unleashed the unlimited creative potential that had always existed.